The deed was read aloud in the cold front room of the Gilder Bakehouse. Every line of it named 2 houses at once. There were 3 people in the room. The lawyer, Mr. Peveril, stood at the head of the long table with the parchment held flat under both hands. He held it the way a man holds down a thing that might otherwise blow away. To his right sat Clarissa Marsdale of High Park. To his left, and not looking at her, sat the Duke of Tarnshaw. Between them, on the bare boards, lay a loaf. It was a dole loaf. The bakehouse had given loaves like it, free, to the poor of 2 parishes for 70 years. This one had been baked that morning to prove the ovens still could bake. It had come out grey and close and heavy as a brick. No one had touched it. Founded in the year of grace 1748, Mr. Peveril read, by Henry Marsdale of High Park and Edmund Normford, then Duke of Tarnshaw, jointly and in equal love of the poor of Gilderdale and Netherfarwood. Clarissa kept her eyes on the loaf. She knew the words already. She had known them since she was a child, small enough to sit under this very table while her father argued across it. Jointly, in equal love. 2 names bound into one sentence, as if the men who wrote it had never once imagined their grandchildren would come to hate the sound of it. The said bakehouse, Peveril went on, to be governed by 2 trustees, 1 of each house. No act to be done, no loaf sold, no master hired, no penny spent, save by the hands of both together. By the hands of both together. That was the whole of it. That was the knot 70 years of Marsdales and Normfords had failed to untie, because it could not be untied, only cut. And neither house would ever be the one to lift the knife. Read the last clause, said the Duke. He had a low voice, level, without heat in it. Clarissa had heard that voice perhaps a dozen times in her life, and never once had it been warm. He sat very straight in his dark coat, his black hair brushed back, his amber eyes fixed on the lawyer as though the lawyer were a witness under examination. He did not fidget. Men like him never did. "I was coming to it, Your Grace," said Peveril. He turned the parchment over. Here the ink was browner, added in a later hand, the founder's careful clerk long since in his grave. "And if it shall come to pass that the said bakehouse falls to ruin," Peveril read, "or ceases to feed the poor, or is left 1 whole year unprofitable by the quarrel of the 2 houses, then the endowment thereof shall pass from both houses forever, that endowment being the mill-ing meadow, and the mill upon it. It shall pass to the nearest heir of the founder's 3rd line." The room was quiet. Somewhere behind the wall a mouse worked in the meal. "And who," said Clarissa, "is the nearest heir of the founder's 3rd line?" "Miss Cordelia Vane," said Peveril. Clarissa had met Miss Vane twice in her life. She was a tall, soft-spoken woman near 50, always in a gown 3 seasons old, and always perfectly composed about it. She lived in 2 rooms in the town on an income no one could name. She had a way of agreeing with you so gently that you quite forgot she had never once agreed to anything at all. "Then let me be plain," said the Duke, "so that we do not waste Mr. Peveril's morning. The bakehouse has not paid its way in 11 years. The dole this Michaelmas was 40 loaves a week, where once it was 300. The master baker is old. The ovens are cracked. The mill leaks half its rent before ever it reaches the trust." He set one gloved hand flat upon the table. "And in 11 years our 2 houses have not agreed on a single measure to mend any part of it." Because you will not, said Clarissa. Because you will not hear of selling one commercial loaf, and I will not go on pouring good money into a charity that cannot keep itself alive. He turned his head and looked at her at last. There is the deadlock, Miss Marsdale, in your own words and in mine both. I will not hear of it, said Clarissa, because the day this house sells its bread instead of giving it, the poor of Gilderdale go without their bread. That is not a nice scruple, Your Grace. That is 40 families at their own doors. And when the endowment reverts to Miss Vane, for want of a profit, how many families does Miss Vane feed? None at all. She feeds herself. He did not raise his voice, for he never raised it. That is the choice before us. Not charity or trade. It is trade, or it is nothing. There it was, then. The whole quarrel, laid out in 2 short speeches. And the maddening thing, the thing that had kept Clarissa awake more nights than she would ever admit to a living soul, was that neither one of them was in the wrong. She had the right of it. Bread that was sold was bread not given, and the founders had meant it given. He had the right of it too. A charity that starved itself to death fed no one at all. The clock was running now, and it would not stop for the sake of a principle, however fine. Mr. Peveril cleared his throat with care. The year runs from this Michaelmas to the next, he said. 12 months exactly. If at Michaelmas next the bakehouse stands in good and profitable order, with the dole restored, then the endowment holds, and the trust continues. If not, it passes to Miss Vane, and the 2 houses lose it forever. And your own opinion of our chances? Said the Duke. You wish it plainly, Your Grace? I wish everything plainly. It saves a great deal of time. Then plainly. At the present rate the endowment passes to Miss Vane, and I see no likelihood on this earth of your preventing it. Peveril rolled the parchment slowly, and the small dry sound of it was very loud in the cold room. You would first have to agree upon the means. In 50 years of serving both your families, I have never once known you to agree upon anything. That is my honest opinion, and I am sorry to be the man to give it you. The Duke rose. He was tall enough to have to mind the low black beam above him, and he minded it without appearing to. He looked once at the grey loaf lying on the table, and something crossed his face that Clarissa could not read, and did not try to. There is one way, he said, that has not been tried. Name it, said Clarissa. Let one of us take the working of it, alone, for the whole year. He said it to the frosted window, and not to her. I will not obstruct you, and I will not pay a farthing. You, for your part, will not ask my purse, and you will not ask my leave. You will do it your own way, wholly, to the very end. And at Michaelmas we shall have your answer, instead of our quarrel. My answer. If you have made it pay, and kept the dole, I will sign every measure of yours that I have ever refused, and I will own before the whole county that I was wrong. If you have not, you will sign the trust over to me. I will do it my own way, and you will never again lift a hand against it. She understood him perfectly. He did not believe she could do it. He thought her a sentimental woman with a dead father's ledgers and a soft heart. She would spend the winter proving to herself what he already knew, then hand him a clean bakehouse and a settled argument at the end of it. He was not offering her a chance at all. He was offering her a lesson. He meant to test her, and to be proven right, and to be very gracious about it afterward. You are putting me in charge of it, she said slowly. in order to test me. I am. He did not trouble to pretend otherwise, and against her own will, she respected him a little for that. Well, Miss Marsdale? Clarissa stood. She was not a tall woman, and she had never tried to seem one. She picked up the grey dole loaf from the table and turned it over in her 2 hands, feeling the wrong weight of it, the meanness of it, the 11 years of neglect baked hard into one bad loaf. I will take it, she said, on one condition. When I have won, you will not merely sign your name to a paper. You will come here, to this room. You will eat a dole loaf that a poor man would be glad of, and you will tell me to my face that it is good. Something moved at the very corner of the Duke's mouth. It was not a smile. It was only the ghost of the place where a smile might one day come to stand. When you have won, he said, I will eat the whole loaf. He drew on his gloves. He said good day to the lawyer. He did not say good day to her. His carriage was heard upon the lane a moment later, going back toward Farwood in the grey. Clarissa stayed. She stood a long while in the cold room, with the bad loaf in her hands, and the founder's 2 names ringing on in her head. Then she set the loaf down. She took from her pocket the great iron key to the meal loft that had been her father's before her. And she went to see exactly how bad it truly was. It was very bad. The meal loft was half empty, and what little grain was left had gone musty in the corners, where the roof let the rain in. There were 2 ovens. One was cracked clean across the crown, so that it could not be fired above a low and useless heat. The other was sound enough, but foul with years of ash that had never once been properly drawn. The kneading troughs were split along their seams. The great peel, the long wooden paddle for the drawing of loaves, had a crack in it bound up with a twist of wire. She found the account book at the last, on a shelf behind the salt. It was kept in a hand so careless that in 3 separate places she could not tell whether a figure was meant for a 5 or a nothing. She found the master baker asleep at 4 in the afternoon, in the warm angle beside the sound oven. Jonas Alder was 70 years old, if he was a day, a great soft ruin of a man who had plainly been strong once. He woke and saw who it was, and was not glad. Miss Marsdale. He got to his feet slowly, joint by joint. Come to look at it, have you? Everyone comes to look at it these days. I have come to work at it, Mr. Alder, she said. You and I are going to make this house pay its way, and feed the poor besides, within the year. Or it goes to Miss Vane, and you and I both go home for good. Which of the 2 would you rather? He blinked at her a while. It had been a long time, she thought, watching his face, since anyone had asked Jonas Alder to rather anything at all. It can't be done, he said. But he said it slowly, the way a man says a thing he half hopes to be argued out of. It can be done, said Clarissa. Show me the mill accounts. That was the first day. There would be 360 more of them, and she would count every single one. High Park stood dark against a darker sky when she rode home that night, and it was her own, every stone of it, in her own right. Her father had left it to her 2 years before, sound but never rich, with the tenants and the timber and the long, low fields all in her keeping and no man's else. She had no brother living to look to. She had no husband, and had not looked for one. The tenants brought their troubles to her door, and she settled them at her own table. She had learned, in 2 hard years, that a woman running her own land is respected exactly as far as she is competent, and not 1 inch further. She sat late that night, with the bakehouse book open before her own fire. She traced her father's old quarrels through it, and the Duke's father's quarrels back and back. She thought of the 2 grey speeches at the trustees' table, and how neither had been wrong, and how that was the very worst of it. An enemy in the wrong you could beat. An enemy in the right you had first to understand. She did not sleep much. She rose before it was light, and rode down to the cold ovens, because there was no one else to do it, and because she had said that she would. There was one thing that she made very plain to herself before she began, and she made it plain that first grey morning, standing alone in the cold bakehouse with her breath showing on the air. She would not do this as a favour to him. She would not do it to win his good opinion. If she saved the bakehouse, she would save it because 40 families ate their bread from its oven, and because her own name was on the founding deed beside his, and because a thing worth keeping ought to be kept. His wager was a small and passing part of it. Let him think it the whole. A woman learns early that the world will always credit a man's dare before it credits a woman's own reason, and she had long since given up minding. She minded the loaves. She minded the tally. She minded that the oven should draw. The Duke of Tarnshaw might watch or not as he pleased, and be right or wrong as he pleased, and it would alter nothing that she did with her 2 hands between now and the spring. The Duke of Tarnshaw did not think of the bakehouse for the better part of a fortnight, which was in itself a kind of luxury he had not known in 2 whole years. He had a dukedom to run. He had a Michaelmas rent day of his own, a drainage scheme in the low, wet fields, an ancient grandmother, and a full 100 concerns that were not a quarrel with the woman from High Park. He was aware, in a distant way, that she was down at Gilder doing whatever it was she meant to do. He assumed that it was very little. He assumed that it was already failing. He learned otherwise from his land agent, Mr. Hobley, out among the low field drains one raw morning. "They've the cracked oven down to the brick, Your Grace," said Hobley. Miss Marsdale had the mason from Farwood cross the beck to look at it. He says the Crown wants rebuilding whole. £40 of work, near enough, if it were paid for in the ordinary way. "She has not £40, said the Duke. "Her father left High Park sound, but not rich. She will not spend £40 upon a single oven." "She is not spending it, Your Grace. Not in coin, leastways." Hobley scratched at his jaw. "She had the whole village turn out to it. The men lay the brick under the mason's eye of an evening, and they do it for their suppers and a dole loaf apiece. She keeps the tally herself. She pays the mason his day wage out of hay. Ovenholme meadow is cut and carried 3 weeks before its proper time. She got a fair price for green hay from the coaching stables, because she drove over and asked for it herself." The Duke rode on a little way in silence. He was turning the thing over, and he did not like the shape it was taking. He had set her a fair task, or so he had told himself. He had believed it to be beyond her. A woman of sentiment and a slender purse, set against a broken oven and a village of doubters. The sum of it had looked very plain to him a fortnight since. It was looking a good deal less plain now. She had not asked him for a shilling. She had not asked him for anything at all. That, more than the hay or the mason or the tally, was the part that would not leave him be. She sold her standing hay early to pay the mason, he said, so that the men would rebuild the oven for their suppers. That is the way of it, Your Grace. That is not a sentimental woman's arithmetic, Hobley. No, Your Grace, said Hobley, who had privately thought Miss Marsdale a very sound woman of business for some years, and had never once been asked his opinion of it. The Duke went home that evening by the Gilder Road, though it was not by any measure his shortest way. He told himself that it was the drains. He drew rein above the bakehouse, where the road ran high along the hill, in the last grey light of the afternoon. And he watched. She was down in the yard in a plain brown gown, with her sleeves turned back to the elbow. She was not directing the work. She was doing it. She had a hod of brick balanced upon her hip, and she carried it up the ramp to where 2 men worked at the oven crown by lantern light. She set it down. She said something that made one of the men laugh aloud. She wiped her forehead with the back of her wrist and left a long smear of mortar dust there, and never knew it. The whole yard was working at once. There was a good fire going in the sound oven, and on the cold evening air came the smell of real bread. It was not the grey, mean smell of the dole loaf on the table. It was bread. Good bread. The kind of smell a man will ride toward without ever quite deciding to. The Duke sat his horse in the dark above them all, and he revised, in silence and at some cost, one of the things he had held for certain. He had thought that she could not do it. He was no longer certain of that. That was all. He was an exact man, and he would not permit himself to say one word more than had been proven, even inside the privacy of his own head. But he had ridden out certain, and he rode home merely curious, and the distance between those 2 small words was a great deal wider than it looked. He did not ride down to her. He did not think that she had seen him there. She had seen him? Clarissa had marked the tall, dark shape against the last of the light the very moment it drew rein upon the hill. She had known the horse by its stand alone, and she had made very sure never to look up at him again. Let him watch, then. Let him ride his fine horse along the high road, and count over all the ways in which she would fail. She set down the hod. She picked up the next one, and if she carried it a little straighter up the ramp than she had carried the last, that was nobody's business in the world but her own. There was a truth in it that she would not have said aloud to a living soul. She worked the harder for his being there. It was not to please him. It was very nearly the opposite of that. Every brick she set was a plain word spoken up the hill at him, in a language he could not pretend not to read. You thought a lady of my house could not lift her own hand. Here is my hand. She was not a girl to be flattered into a thing, nor frightened out of one. He had offered her a wager, as though he were doing her a courtesy, and there was a coldness in that courtesy that she had felt to the bone. He had looked at High Park, and at her father's ledgers, and at her plain gown, and he had decided, kindly, what she was. She meant to spend the winter unteaching him. And if she was honest in the one place a person is ever fully honest, which is the dark behind the eyes, at the end of a long day, she wanted him to be there to see it undone. That was a danger, and she knew it for one, and she set it down beside the hod and picked up the brick instead. We'll take a very short break. If you don't want to miss new stories, please subscribe to the channel. The oven crown was rebuilt and cured by the middle of October, and it drew like a dream. On the first proper baking day, Clarissa fired both ovens at 3 in the black morning, and stood in the red glow of them with old Jonas Alder at her side. She watched the first true batch go in. 40 white loaves for the selling, 60 dole loaves for the giving. When they came out an hour later, she could have wept for the plain beauty of them. She did not. Jonas was watching her, and a woman who means to be minded does not weep over a batch of bread. They were good. They were very good indeed. Jonas Alder, it turned out, had been a great baker once. Before 11 years of never being allowed to spend a shilling, had slowly taught him not to try. Give the man sound flour, a hot, clean oven, and a reason to care, and his old hands remembered every last thing they had ever known. The white loaves went to the 2 coaching inns and the better houses of the town, by an arrangement Clarissa made entirely herself. She drove the Trust's old cart down with her own hands. She knocked at the kitchen doors and waited to be seen. She undercut the town baker by a farthing on a plainly better loaf, and the cooks were not slow to notice it. The dole loaves went out every Saturday morning to the poor of both parishes, as they had done in the founder's own day. They were no longer grey and mean and hard. They were bread that a hungry man was truly glad to carry home. There was one Saturday morning that Clarissa carried in her memory long afterward. An old woman named Bess Harrod, who had taken the grey dole loaf for 11 hard years, and never once complained of it, came up to the hatch for the new bread. She turned the loaf over in her worn hands, the way a person turns a thing they cannot quite believe is truly theirs. Then she looked up, and she did not say thank you, for the poor of Gilderdale were far too proud for that, and Clarissa was glad of their pride. She said only, "It smells the way it did when I was a girl." And she carried it home, held against her breast, like something living. Clarissa went back inside and set another 60 loaves to prove. But she did not forget the look on Bess Harrod's face, not that whole winter, and not to the end of her own days. It was the plain whole of the argument, standing there in a doorway in a worn grey shawl. It was the reason a loaf given away was still a loaf worth the keeping. The books began, very slowly, and against all Mr. Peveril's expectations, to turn. She did the books herself, every night without fail, at the long table in the cold front room, in a clear, small hand. Every farthing was set down where it fell, so that never again could a 5 be mistaken for a nothing. She found the great leak in her second week, and it was a good deal worse than the leak in the roof. It was the mill mill, the endowment's own mill, that ground the Trust's grain and let its lower floor to the farmers for their own. It paid its rent to the Trust each quarter, or rather, it was meant to. The rent came in short, and had come in short for years. Clarissa rode up the frozen beck to see the miller about it. She found a sly, comfortable man named Rook, who kept very poor books of his own, and grew steadily less comfortable the more of hers she laid out before him. "The rent's set low, miss, on account of the repairs I stand myself," said Rook. "Always been so. Miss Vane's own late father set it in that fashion, when he had the ordering of things. God rest the good gentleman. Miss Vane's father has been 20 years in his grave, Mr. Rook," said Clarissa, "and Miss Vane is not a trustee of this endowment. She never has been." "She takes an interest, miss," said Rook, comfortably. A kindly interest. She is often up along to see the mill is kept as it should be. Clarissa rode home slowly through the dusk, turning it over. A kindly interest. Miss Cordelia Vane, who stood to gain the whole endowment the very day the bakehouse failed, took a kindly interest in the endowment's mill. And the mill's rent came in short, and had done for years. All the while the quarrel of the two great houses had kept anybody from looking closely into it. It was not proof of anything. It was a pattern in the rough shape of a hand. And Clarissa thought, riding home, that she knew whose hand it was. She told no one yet, not even Jonas. She was not a woman who would accuse where she could not first prove. She raised the mill rent to its proper lawful figure by the plain reading of the lease, in writing, with Mr. Peveril's own countersigning to it. She set young Dan from the bakehouse to carry the flour tallies himself, so that Rook could no longer short the weight along the way. The rent came in full the very next quarter. Rook was not pleased. Miss Vane, she did not doubt, was a great deal less pleased still, though Miss Vane sent her only a very gracious note, wishing her every success in her brave undertaking. Clarissa read the note through twice, and then she burned it. The county learned of the bakehouse before the Duke's next quarter day came round, for the county learns of everything in the end. And it made of her exactly what the county always makes of a woman doing a man's business, and doing it well. At the Michaelmas sessions, over the cold beef, Sir Marcus Doggett held forth to the whole long table. He was a magistrate with a red face and a loud, carrying kindness that was the very cruelest thing about him. "They tell me the Marsdale girl has turned shopkeeper down at Gilder," he said, "selling loaves off the back of a cart, no less. Marsdale, of High Park's own daughter, hawking bread about the town like a baker's wife. Her poor father would turn in his grave to see it. There is a great want of a man to check these things, Tarnshaw. You are half a trustee of the place yourself, are you not? You ought to have stopped her making such a spectacle of herself, and of her whole class." The table waited comfortably for the Duke to agree with him. He was known for a cold and correct man, one who cared greatly for what was owed to rank and name. It was quite the safe thing to think he would say. "I have seen the bakehouse, Sir Marcus," said the Duke. "Then you have seen the spectacle for yourself. I have seen a woman rebuild a broken oven with her own tenants' hands. I have seen her sell honest bread at an honest price. She keeps alive a charity that two great houses let rot for 11 years, out of nothing but their pride, and mine was one of the two." His voice did not rise. It never rose. It only grew more exact, which in him was very much worse. "Miss Marsdale is not a spectacle, sir. She's doing alone, and doing well, the one thing that all her betters could not manage to do together. I was the first among those betters. If her father can indeed see it, I imagine that he is proud of her. I imagine, too, that he is ashamed of the company, which laughs at her over his own memory. I know that I am ashamed of it." He returned to his beef. No one at the table said anything at all for rather a long while. Sir Marcus grew redder still, and presently discovered that he had a pressing engagement elsewhere. The Duke had not planned to say any of it. He had heard the sneer, and something within him had simply refused it before he had decided to, the way a hand refuses a hot iron before the mind is consulted. He thought about it a good deal, riding home in the dark. He had defended her. In public, before the whole county, against his own set, upon a plain point of her honour. He examined the fact as he examined every fact, turning it slowly to the light. He found that he did not in the least wish to take it back. He found that he could not perfectly say why he had done it. And he found that not being able to say why was a wholly new experience for a man of 32, who had always kept an exact reason for everything he did. It unsettled him more, riding home, than the sneer itself had done. He did not tell her that he had defended her. It would have been a kind of asking for something, and he did not rightly know for what. She heard of it in any case, for the county learns of everything. It was old Peg Alder, Jonas's wife, who told her, cackling with delight over the wash-tub, how his Grace of Tarnshaw had put down Sir Marcus Doggett at the very sessions table and taken Miss Marsdale's own part before the whole bench of them. Clarissa said only that it was very civil of him, and kept her face quite still. But she carried a great deal more feeling out of that steaming wash-house than she had carried into it. Why? That was the question that would not leave her that night over the books. Why had he done such a thing? He gained nothing by it, nothing at all. If she failed, the whole bakehouse fell to him. Let the county laugh her out of the yard, and she failed the sooner, and he won the sooner. A man playing to win would have laughed along with Sir Marcus. He had done the exact opposite, at some cost to himself, and for no gain that she could see. She could not make it fit. She had decided 2 years since that he was a cold and prideful duke, who had put her in charge only to teach her a lesson she would not forget. This new fact did not fit that man at all. And when a plain fact will not fit the man you have decided that a person is, an honest woman must at least consider that she has decided wrong. She did not wish to consider it. She considered it in any case, in the small, clear hand of a woman who set down every farthing exactly where it truly fell. The frost came early that year, and it came hard. It came down in the 2nd week of December, a black Yorkshire frost out of a still sky, and it did not lift again. The beck froze from bank to bank. The great mill wheel froze fast. The roads went to iron under the horses' feet. And the poor of Gilderdale and Nether Farwood came to that frost with nothing at all put by. They had been living all the autumn on the restored dole, and the dole itself had made it possible for them to put nothing by. It is the oldest and the cruelest trap in all of charity, and Clarissa had walked straight into it, with her eyes wide open. The only alternative had been to let them go short in October, in order to be provident in December, and she had not been able to make herself do it. Now it was December. The mill was frozen and still. The trust's own grain could not be ground. Bought flour was dear, for every mill for 20 miles about was frozen too, and the dole that 40 families now leaned their whole weight upon was 3 days from stopping altogether. She did the sum 4 times over, and it came out the same each time. She had bread flour for 4 more days of full baking, dole, and sale together. If she stopped the sale loaves entirely, she could stretch the dole to 9 days. 9 days would not see out the frost. Nothing that she had would see out the frost. She sat in the cold front room at 2 in the morning with the number written plain before her, and for the first time since Michaelmas she was afraid. She was not afraid of losing the wager. She was afraid of the thing the wager had always truly been about underneath. People in the frost, without their bread. There was flour enough at Farwood. The Duke kept a great granary against a bad year, well found and dry, a Duke's own provision. She knew that it was there. She could have gone to him and asked. She could not go to him and ask. The whole terms of the thing forbade it utterly. You will not ask my purse. If she went up to Farwood and asked the Duke for his flour, then she asked his purse, and she lost cleanly by her own given word, and worse than merely lost. She proved him right. She proved that a woman's charity could not stand upon its own feet, that in the end it must come cap in hand to a man's granary after all. She would rather have gone hungry herself, and very nearly meant to. She was still sitting there at 3 in the morning when the cart came. She heard it first upon the frozen lane, the iron tires ringing on the iron ground. She thought first of thieves, and then of nothing sensible whatever, and went out into the yard with the lantern held high. It was a farm cart, and it was Farwood's. She knew the horse of old. It was piled high with good sacks, good bolting flour, 20 sacks of it, dry and sweet to the smell. It was driven by Hobley the agent, muffled to the very eyes against the cold. There was no note upon it. There was no name spoken. There was no message at all, save the one the flour made simply by being there in her yard at 3 in the morning. "Who sent this?" said Clarissa. "Couldn't rightly say, miss," said Hobley, who could have said perfectly well. "Found it wanted delivering. Where will you have it put?" "Mr. Hobley, who sent this flour to me?" Hobley looked at her a long moment in the swaying lantern light. He was an honest man, badly served by a plain question, and he compromised, as honest men will. "I was told, miss," he said at last, "that if I was asked, I was to say the Trust had bought the flour, at the November price, out of the Trust's own money, and that the account would be found square in the spring. I was told to say it very particular, miss." He climbed stiffly down to help her with the sacks. Whether that is truly how it is, I could not tell you. I only carry what I am told to carry, and say what I am told to say. At the November price, out of the Trust's own money. It was a lie, plainly, and it was a gift built carefully as a lie, so that it should not be a gift at all. She could take it without asking, without owing, without losing. The terms of the wager stood entirely untouched. The 40 families ate. He had found the one crack in his own hard bargain, and driven 20 sacks of flour clean through it in the dark. He had arranged it all so that, if she chose, she need never so much as know his hand had been in it. She stood there in the frozen yard, and she understood the Duke of Tarnshaw for the very first time. It came all at once, the way you come to understand a difficult page, when the single word you had, wrong at last, comes right. He was not a cold man, who cared only for rank. He was a scrupulous man, who cared terribly about a great many things, and had been taught somewhere very early, never once to be caught at it. His pride was not that he felt nothing. His pride was that he could not bear to be seen to feel it. "Thank you, Mr. Hobley," she said quietly. "The Trust is much obliged for the flour it bought at the November price." "Aye, miss," said Hobley, and they unloaded the 20 sacks together in the black frost, without another word passing about it. It was the most that either of them could do for a duke, who would have been mortified past bearing by any word at all. The frost broke at last upon Christmas Eve. The dole had never stopped. Not one family of the 40 had gone without its loaf through the hardest fortnight in 20 years, and no soul in Gilderdale ever knew how very near it had come. That was exactly as Clarissa had meant it to be. And exactly, she thought, as he would have meant it to be too. She went up to Farwood on the day after Christmas to thank him, and to do a thing that she had decided upon in the frozen yard, and had not once talked herself out of since. He received her in the estate office, and not in the drawing-room, and she was glad of it. It was a plain working room of maps and ledgers, and a good fire in the grate, a labouring man's room set down inside a great house. He stood when she came in. He did not sit again. Neither did she. "Miss Marsdale." "Your Grace, I have come to thank the Trust's benefactor, whoever the good man may be. And finding that I do not know his name, I thought that I would thank you instead, since you happen to be nearest to hand." The corner of his mouth moved a very little. "The Trust bought flour, I understand, at a fair price. There is nothing in that to thank a duke for." "No," she agreed. "There is not. So I will not thank you." She drew a breath. This was the thing she had come to say. "I have come instead to tell you that you were right, and I was wrong upon one point. And I would far rather say it to your face than have you find it out for yourself in the spring accounts." He went quite still. She had his whole attention now, and it was no small thing to have. "Say it," he said. "You said that a charity which cannot keep itself alive feeds no one at all. I called it a hard saying, and I held to my full dole against all sense. In October, I fed people who then put nothing by against the winter. In December, the frost very nearly killed them for my kindness." She held her chin level. "I was wrong to give without a single thought for the cold months coming. A charity must be provident, or it is only pride wearing a poor man's coat. You were right. I have changed the way of it. There is a winter store built up now, laid by in the good months against the bad, and it costs a smaller dole in the autumn. It is your own principle. I took it because it is true, and I would not have you think me too proud to say as much aloud." It cost her, and he saw that it cost her. He had watched this woman carry brick upon her hip and drive her own cart through the town. He had watched her put down her own plain hunger sooner than ask a farthing of his purse. He understood exactly what it was for a person of that stamp to stand in her enemy's own office and say, "You were right, and I was wrong." She said it plainly, at the cost of the one thing she still had left to her, which was the being right. "Miss Marsdale," he said. And his voice was not the level, exact voice of the trustees' table now. It was a degree lower than that, and it was quite unguarded, and it was the first fully unguarded sentence that he had ever spoken to her in his life. "In 2 years of quarrelling with you, I have never once heard you concede a point that you were not forced to concede. I find that I would rather you were right against me than that you should ever have to say a thing like that." The fire cracked in the grate. Neither of them moved toward it or away. "That is a strange thing," said Clarissa, "for an adversary to say." "I am beginning to think," said the Duke, "that we chose the wrong word for it 2 years ago, and that we have each of us been too proud to change it since." She left Farwood without either of them having said one word more than that. It was a very great deal more than either had said in 2 long years, and she felt the plain want of the word they had not found, all the long cold ride back home to High Park. They came to use the given names for the first time in February, and it was not planned at all, and it came at the very end of a battle fairly won. The battle was the vestry. The old town baker suffered now from the bakehouse, for its honest, cheaper loaf cut hard into his trade. He got up a petition to the whole parish, claiming that the trust was ruining an honest tradesman by selling below his cost with charity money at its back. It was not true. The sale loaf paid its own way to the last farthing, beholden to no dole. But it sounded true, and a lie that sounds true can close a bakehouse as dead as ever a broken oven can. Clarissa went down to the vestry meeting alone, with her account books under her arm. She did not expect the Duke to come. He came in late, and stood at the back of the room in his dark coat, and said not a word. She understood him at once. He had come only to be counted upon her side of it, and to do nothing further. He would lend her the plain weight of his standing. He would not take her own fight out of her hands. She was grateful past all speaking, and gave no least sign of it, for the fight was hers, and she meant to win it herself. She won it herself. She laid the books open upon the vestry table before them all. She walked the whole parish through it, farthing by farthing. Here the sale loaf, there the dole loaf, the one never for a moment beholden to the other. She was so exact, and so plain, and so plainly telling them the simple truth. The petition died there in the room for want of any man willing to stand up and say aloud that a thing this clearly honest was a fraud. The old baker went home. The bakehouse stood. Afterward, in the cold dark of the churchyard, the Duke fell into step at her side upon the path. "You did not need me there," he said. "No," said Clarissa, "but I was glad that you came." She had not meant to say the second part of it. She said it anyway. It was February, and the fight was won, and she was very tired of guarding things. "Clarissa," he said. She stopped upon the path. He had never once used her name. The 2 whole years of Miss Marsdale and your Grace fell clean away in the single word, and left the 2 of them standing there in a cold, dark churchyard, with nothing formal left to hide behind. "Owen," she said. She tried it upon her tongue. It was strange in her mouth for a moment, and then it was not strange at all. Neither of them said anything more. They walked together to the churchyard gate in the dark, not touching, saying nothing. And it was the loudest silence that either of them had ever kept in their lives. They parted at the gate with a look instead of a word. Each rode home to a separate great house. Each banked a separate fire down for the night. Each sat late alone before it, thinking hard of the other. 2 proud people at 2 cold hearths, a whole valley apart, each nursing the very same astonishing thought, and neither one of them yet able to say it aloud, even alone. The spring ought to have been the sweet part of it. The books turned fully in April. The bakehouse paid its way clear. The dole stood provident and full. The county came slowly round, from laughing at her to boasting of the famous Gilder loaf, as though they had baked it themselves. The wager was as good as won, with 5 whole months yet to spare. It ought to have been the sweet, slow part, where 2 people who have stopped being enemies find out, carefully, what it is that they have become instead. It was Cordelia Vane who would not let it be so. She came to the bakehouse in May, in person, in her 3-season gown, as gracious as ever she had been. She admired everything about the place. She admired the rebuilt oven and the full loft, the neat, clear books, and the fine white loaves upon the board. And she admired Clarissa most of all, so very gently and so very long that Clarissa's neck prickled the whole while she did it, for a woman does not praise most warmly the one thing she most needs to fail. "You have done wonders here, my dear. Truly you have," said Miss Vane. "I had not thought it in you, I confess, and I am so very glad to be proved wrong in it. Of course, it does put my own poor little expectation quite out of reach forever. But what is that, set against the good of the poor? I would not have had it any other way in the world." She smiled. "Though I will own that I was surprised to learn how very much of it was the Duke's doing after all." "The Duke has done nothing," said Clarissa, far too quickly. "No." Miss Vane's brows rose the smallest possible degree. "Only I had heard such particular things of it. 20 sacks of good firewood flour in the deep frost, in the dead of the night, brought by his own agent. His Grace himself standing up for the bakehouse at the sessions, and again at the vestry after." She laid one gloved hand very gently upon Clarissa's arm. "Half the county says outright that the poor Marsdale girl could never have done it without the Duke's hand set under her the whole long way. They say the wager was a sham from the first. A pretty little arrangement between two great houses, got up to keep a mere third cousin from her honest due. I do not say it, of course. But you cannot stop the county saying it. And you cannot, I think, quite look me in the eye and swear that it is false. Can you now, my dear?" She could not. That was the whole horror of it, standing there in her own paid, provident, thriving bakehouse in the bright May sun. She could not swear that it was false. The flour had indeed been firewood flour. He had spoken for her at the sessions, and stood for her at the vestry, both, every last kindness that he had done her in secret, every scrupulous gift he had built carefully as a lie, so that she need never owe him for it, was now a hard stone in Cordelia Vane's soft hand. And Miss Vane meant to build them, stone by stone, into a wall. And the wall would say, plainly, that the woman had not done it alone, that the wager was void, that the endowment reverts. "What is it that you want, Miss Vane?" said Clarissa. "Want? I want nothing at all, my dear. I have only come to tell you that I shall be present at the trustees' meeting at Michaelmas, as an interested party, and with witnesses. The mason, Mr. Hobley, Mr. Rook up at the mill, who has such a very good memory for the Duke's comings and his goings." Her voice never lost its softness. "And I shall ask, quite humbly, only the one question. Did Miss Marsdale keep this house for the year alone, as the wager plainly bound her to? Or did the Duke of Tarnshaw carry her the whole year through in secret? And I think, my dear, that an honest woman, such as we all know you to be, upon her sworn oath, will not be able to say that she did it alone. And then the endowment is mine, and no great house on earth can gainsay it, for it will be true." She gathered up her old shawl about her. "I am not your enemy, Miss Marsdale. I am only a poor woman with one single thing in all the world coming to her, and I mean to have it. You, of all people, should understand a woman who means to keep what is her own. Good day to you." She went out into the bright May sunshine, gracious to the very last of it, and she left the whole ruin standing there behind her. And it was a very complete ruin, for it was built entirely out of the truth. Clarissa did not go to Owen. She fought it out alone for 3 days first. It was her fight, and her books, and her year. She was afraid of what she would feel the moment that she saw his face. She had begun to understand that everything he had done for her in kindness was now the exact instrument of her defeat. And she did not know how to hold both of those things at once in her 2 hands without something breaking. When she did go to him, at the last, it was worse than she had feared. He already knew. "Rook came to me," Owen said. They were in the estate office once again, but nothing was easy in it now. "To sell me the very same silence he is selling her, I imagine. He offered, for a consideration, to forget all my comings and goings at the bakehouse. I threw him out of the house. And then I saw the whole shape of it, the way that you must have seen it. Every hand I ever put out to help you, she has picked up again to break you with." His jaw was tight. She had never seen him angry, truly angry, and it was not loud at all. It was a cold, white stillness, and it was far more frightening to watch than any amount of shouting. "I did those things to save the bakehouse," he said, "and to keep from ever being seen to do them. Both of those were pride in the end. And now my pride is going to cost you the very thing that all my help was meant to build. If I had only done nothing at all, you would have done it clean. You would have won it. You would have been wholly beyond her reach. I could not even help you without ruining you for it." "Do not," said Clarissa. "Do not what?" "Do not take it all upon yourself. It is not yours alone to carry. If you carry it alone, then you will fix it alone. And I did not fight a whole year for this, to have it fixed for me at the very end by a duke's grand gesture, however honest the gesture. We are in this the same, you and I." She was surprised by her own steadiness. "Cordelia Vane is going to stand up at Michaelmas and ask whether I did it alone. And the true answer, the whole true answer, is no. I did not do it alone. You carried some part of it." "Then how?" "If I get up before them all and swear that I did it alone, then I lie. I have not told one lie in this whole year. I will not begin at the very end of it, to keep a mill that I love from a woman who has a great deal less than I do." She set her jaw. "So we are not going to fight her lie with a lie of our own. We are going to have to find some other thing entirely." "What other thing is there," said Owen, "against a true accusation?" Clarissa was quiet a moment. Outside the window, the May afternoon went slowly gold. "A truer one," she said, "but I do not have it yet. Give me until Michaelmas." It was the dowager who gave her the truer thing in the end, and she gave it because she had been waiting 50 long years for somebody to come along who was worth the telling of it. Lavinia, Dowager Duchess of Tarnshaw, was 81 years old and sharp as a surgeon's lancet, and she was bored past all bearing by everyone who was afraid of her, which was everyone alive. She summoned Clarissa up to the Farwood Dower House in July, over her grandson's own cautious head. She looked her over for a long, slow minute. She liked what she saw of her, and said so bluntly to her face. And then she told her all the rest of it. "You wish to know how the quarrel first began," said the old woman. "Everyone thinks that they know it. Everyone alive is wrong. I know it, for my own mother was there to see it, and she told it me the once upon her deathbed, it being the only time in her whole proud life that she was not too proud to. Sit down, girl. You make my old neck ache, standing up like that." Clarissa sat. The bakehouse was not built by two great houses in equal love of the poor, said the dowager. That is the lie that is carved deep into the lintel, and lies are always carved the very deepest. It was built by two people who loved one another. Henry Marsdale's own daughter, Anne, and Edmund Normford's son, the young lord that then was. They meant to be married, and the two houses forbade it them. Why did they forbid it? Said Clarissa. I never learned quite why. Some matter of a settlement. Some slight given and never forgiven. The sort of small thing that seems worth 2 young lives to old men with account books, where their hearts should be. The two of them were parted for good. The old woman's voice did not soften as she spoke. It sharpened, if anything at all. But before they were parted, in the one single summer that they were allowed to have, they built the bakehouse together, with their own money and with their own 2 pairs of hands, to feed the poor of both their parishes. And they wrote it into the deed of it, that it must be governed by both houses together, for ever after, by both hands, or by none. Clarissa found that she could not speak at all. Do you see now what it was that they did, girl? They could not be married. So they built one single thing that could never be run at all, except by their 2 houses joining their hands across it. And they bound it up in the law so very tight that Marsdale and Normford would be made to reach across to one another over that oven every year of the world. They must do so until the very end of it, or else lose the thing entirely. It was never a charity. It was a marriage that they were forbidden to have, made instead out of brick and law, and they left it to their 2 families as a standing order, to do forever the one thing that the families would never let them do themselves, to love one another's house. The old woman leaned forward in her chair. And the families were exactly the fools that their own children had always known them for. They took a plain monument of love, and they made a battlefield of it. They quarrelled across that oven for 70 years together. They called it the Founders' Quarrel. The founders never quarrelled once in their whole lives. They loved. It was we who quarrelled over their grave, in their good name, and against their own plain last wish. She leaned back again into the chair, and now here is a Marsdale who has made the thing pay at last, and feed the poor besides, with a Normford's own hand set quiet under hers the whole long way. The 2 houses joined over that oven at the very last, exactly as Anne and her young lord meant them to be. And Yvain, of all the sour, dead-ended cousins in England, wants now to prove that a Marsdale and a Normford worked together, so as to break the whole thing apart forever. Do you not see the great joke of it, girl? She means to destroy the thing by proving that it has finally, after 70 years, come true. Clarissa saw it. She saw the whole of it at once, and it took the breath clean out of her. It was not a defence at all. It was a great deal better than a defence. It turned the whole accusation clean inside out, like a glove. Cordelia Vane meant to prove that a Marsdale and a Normford had joined their hands over the bakehouse. And that joining was not the breaking of the founder's will. It was the very fulfilment of it. It was the one thing that the founders had ever truly wanted in all the world. Is there proof of it? Clarissa said. Of the true founding. Not your good mother's word, may she rest. A paper. That Anne Marsdale and the young lord built it as they did, and why they did it so. There is a paper, said the dowager. There is always a paper, if only you know which fool it was that kept it. My mother kept it. It is a letter, written in Anne Marsdale's own hand, to Anne's own father. She meant him to have it after she was gone from the world. It tells him plainly what she had built, and precisely why she built it so. And it begs him to let the two houses keep it together, since he would not let the two people be together. The old woman's smile was a terrible, ancient, delighted thing. It is in the muniment box at Farwood, under my own grandson's roof. It has sat there unread for 70 years, because everyone who ever held the key to it was far too proud to go looking for a thing that might make the whole quarrel their own fault. Go and read it, girl. Take Owen with you. It is high time that one of you was braver than your grandfathers were. I do not much mind which one of you it is. They read it together, in the muniment room at Farwood, by the light of the same lamp, their two heads bent close over 70-year-old ink. It was everything that the Dowager had said it was, and a great deal more besides, for it was Anne Marsdale's own voice reaching clean across 70 years. Here was a young woman who had lost everything in the world, and who had built one single thing so that the losing of everything might come to mean something in the end. She wrote across her own coming grave, and she asked her father to be kinder to the Normfords than ever he had found it in him to be to her. Clarissa read it, and she wept at the last, freely, and she did not care that Owen was there to see her weep. Owen read it, and he did not weep, for he was a Normford, and could not. But he laid his hand over hers upon the old page, plainly, the way a person does a thing that he no longer means to guard. And they stayed like that a long while together over Anne Marsdale's letter. Two proud people, ceasing at the very last to be proud. "This is the truer thing," said Owen at last. "Yes," said Clarissa. "You will read it out at Michaelmas. When Vane rises up to prove that a Marsdale and a Normford worked together, you will let her prove every word of it, every sack of flour, and every stone of the oven. And then you will stand up before them all and read this. You will show the whole county that the two houses joining their hands over that oven is not the death of the founder's will. It is the whole of it, come true at the very last." "We will read it out," said Clarissa. "Not I. We. You will stand up beside me, upon your own 2 feet, as the other trustee of it. You will say that it was your hand set under mine. You will say that you are not ashamed of it, and that Anne Marsdale would be glad of it. It is your fight, every bit as much as it is mine. You do not get to hand me a paper and stand at the back of the room being noble. Not this time." Owen looked at her a long moment. "No," he said, "not this time." But there remained still the matter of Cordelia Vane. She would go home from Michaelmas with nothing at all, having staked her whole life upon a mill that she had counted upon for 30 years. And Clarissa found, to her own great surprise, that she could not be glad of it. She thought of the 2 bare rooms in the town. She thought of the 3-season gown, worn so very composedly year after year. She thought of the one single thing in all the world coming to a poor woman who had no other thing at all. And she understood it, for she was a woman who had also fought hard for the one thing that was her own. She knew exactly what it was to be Cordelia Vane. She could not send her home to nothing, and then stand there and call the nothing justice. That was Clarissa's own battle, and she fought it entirely alone. She told no one what she meant to do about it, not even Owen. It was hers. Michaelmas came. The trustees met to judge the wager, and they did not meet in the cold front room this time. They met in the bakehouse yard itself, for the whole of Gilderdale and half of Nether Farwood had come out to it, drawn there by a full year of good bread and a full year of talk. No room in the place would ever have held them all. It had the very look of a harvest home about it. The trestles were set out. The year's finest loaves stood stacked upon the boards, gold and glorious in the autumn light. The smell of good bread lay over the whole crowded yard like a plain benediction. Mr. Peveril stood at a table with the deed spread before him. The Duke stood upon the one side of the lawyer, and Clarissa upon the other. And forward through the crowd came Miss Cordelia Vane, in her old gown, gracious and pale and perfectly composed. The Miller Rook came at her back, and she carried a paper of her own held in her hand. She made her case beautifully. Clarissa would always grant her that much. She rose, and she was gentle and reasonable. She wept a very little, and the tears were real ones. She asked the crowd to understand that she was only a poor woman, claiming her honest due under the plain words of the deed. And then she turned to Clarissa, and asked her question softly, upon Clarissa's own honour before the whole assembled county. Miss Marsdale, upon your oath, as the honest woman that we all here know you to be, did you keep this bakehouse for the year alone, as the wager bound you fast to do? Or did the Duke of Tarnshaw help you in secret, with his flower and his voice and his hand, the whole year through? The yard went entirely silent. It was Clarissa's own moment, and every soul in it, Owen most of all, waited there to see her either lie to save the thing she loved, or tell the truth and lose it. She told the truth. He helped me, said Clarissa clearly, so that the whole yard heard every word. Miss Vane has it exactly right. The Duke of Tarnshaw sent 20 sacks of Farwood flour through the black frost at Christmas, in the dead of the night, so that the dole should not stop. He built the gift carefully as a lie, so that I need never owe him for it. He spoke for me at the sessions. He stood for me at the vestry. I did not keep this bakehouse alone. A Marsdale and a Normford kept it together. Every word that Miss Vane has said to you is true. Cordelia Vane's pale face began very slightly to shine. Then, by the deed, she said, the wager is not met, and the endowment— By the deed, said Clarissa. And now she took up the old paper, Anne Marsdale's letter, and her voice rang clear off the bakehouse wall. Let us read the deed properly, all of it. The true founding of it, in the founder's own hand. It has lain unread at Farwood for 70 years, because every one of us was far too proud to go and look. And she read it. She read Anne Marsdale's letter out to the whole silent yard. The young woman parted from the man that she loved. The one single thing she built that could only live at all if the two houses joined their hands across it. Her plain plea to her own father, to keep it together, since he would not keep them. She read it to the very end. She read to the place where the ink was blotted and spread, where a girl 70 years dead had wept upon her own page as she wrote it. There was not one dry eye in all the yard when Clarissa finished it. Even the Miller Rook had taken off his hat without ever noticing that he had. This bakehouse was never a charity that two houses ran in spite of their quarrel, said Clarissa into the great silence. It was a marriage that two houses were forbidden. It was built into the very brick, so that it could never be run except by the two houses joining their hands. Miss Vane asks you whether a Marsdale and a Normford worked together this year. Yes, we did. For the first time in 70 years we did. Exactly as Anne Marsdale built this place to make us do. If that joining breaks the founder's will, then the founders did not know their own will. It does not break it. It is the whole of it, come true at the very last. There is your judgment, Mr. Peveril. The deed is not failed. The deed is finally, after 70 long years, kept. Mr. Peveril had served both houses for 50 years, and had privately given up on the pair of them long ago. He read Anne Marsdale's letter through twice, in front of everyone, with his spectacles trembling upon his nose. Then he set it down upon the table. And he spoke in the voice of a man laying down a burden that he had carried a great deal longer than he had ever known. In his considered judgment as trustee at law, he said, the founding intention was met, and the endowment stood. He would stake his whole practice upon any court in England agreeing with him. The yard roared. It went up all at once, a whole village a year hungry for a reason to be glad. It broke over Clarissa and Owen, where they stood upon either side of the lawyer's table, and for a long moment neither of them could move for the sheer noise of it. And that was when Owen did the thing that he had planned. The costly thing. Alone. The thing that Clarissa did not know was coming at all. He raised his hand, and the yard hushed, for a duke's raised hand still hushes a Yorkshire yard. And then he spoke. The judgment is given, and it is just, and I am glad of it past my power to say so, said Owen. But I will not have it said, now or ever hereafter, that this house stands only by a great house's favour. I will not have it said that Miss Marsdale's year was carried by my purse. So I do this thing before you all, that no man may ever mistake it. He took a paper up from Peveril, ready drawn. Clarissa saw with a jolt exactly what it was. I resign, from this day forward, all governance of the Gilder Bakehouse to Miss Marsdale, soul and whole, and I convey to the trust, freely and forever, the Mill Ing meadow, and the mill that stands upon it. They were mine to claim by the wager. They are now the trust's own, beyond any house's reach, or any cousin's claim. I take nothing. I keep nothing. He looked at Clarissa across the table. The wager I made to test her, I lose on purpose, and gladly, for she has taught me the one thing my grandfathers never learned, that the founders were wiser by far than the houses, and that the only honest way for a Normford to hold this place at all is not to hold it. He signed his name to it. He signed away the mill, the meadow, the governance, the whole victory that he could have taken clean. He did it in front of the whole county, expecting nothing back for it. He set down the pen. He looked at Clarissa across the table, and the whole yard looked at Clarissa too, for a man had just now lowered his arms all the way to the ground, in front of every soul present, and now it was hers to answer him. She answered. No, said Clarissa. The yard held its breath. Owen went very still indeed. I will not take it soul and whole, she said, and I will tell you all plainly why, so that no one here mistakes it. Anne Marsdale did not build this place to be run by one house. She built it, at the cost of her whole happiness, to be run by two houses, together, forever. If I take it alone, even to honour her, then I break the one thing that she died to make. So I will not take it. She picked up the pen that he had just set down. I amend the conveyance. The milling goes to the trust, yes, forever, beyond any house's reach. But the governance of it stays exactly as Anne Marsdale wrote it down. 2 trustees, 1 of each house, by both hands or by none. I will not run the Gilder Bakehouse without the Duke of Tarnshaw beside me. Not now, and not ever. It was never once meant to be run without him. Her voice did not shake, though it cost her everything she had to keep it steady before the whole county. And I find that I do not, in truth, wish to run anything at all without him. She signed her amendment beneath his conveyance. 2 names, 1 paper, both hands, exactly as it had been meant to be, 70 years and 1 summer ago. The yard did not roar this second time. It made instead a softer sound, an older and a gladder sound. It was the sound that a great many people make all at once, when they have watched a very hard thing come right at the last. Owen crossed to her own side of the table. He did it in front of the whole county. He did it in front of his grandmother, who sat there smiling the terrible, ancient, satisfied smile of a woman whose 50-year patience has been rewarded at last. He took Clarissa's hand, plainly, the way a person does a thing that he will never again in his life mean to guard. He did not say anything clever. He was not a clever man. He was a scrupulous one. By both hands, he said. Or none? Or none, said Clarissa. There remained still Cordelia Vane. She stood pale and forgotten at the very edge of it all, having staked her whole life upon a mill, and lost. Clarissa left Owen's side, and went to her through the glad crowd. And the crowd went quiet again, wary now, expecting the beaten cousin to be sent off home with some hard word that she had richly earned. Miss Vane, said Clarissa quietly, so that only the nearest few could hear her, you will go home from here today with nothing that you came for. I know well what that is. I have been a woman with one single thing in the world coming to her. So I will not send you home to 2 bare rooms and a turned gown. She kept her voice level and kind. The mill wants a keeper's house and a keeper in it. It wants someone who knows the endowment's whole business better than any living soul. And God knows you have watched that mill close enough these 30 years. The place is yours, a fair wage with it, and the mill cottage to live in, for as long as ever you keep it honest. And I think that you will keep it honest, having no more reason left not to. Cordelia Vane stared at her, unable to speak. It is not the whole endowment, said Clarissa. It is a roof, and a wage, and a use, and it is offered by a Marsdale to a Vane, in the founder's own spirit, which was always meant to reach a good deal further than 2 great houses. Will you take it? Cordelia Vane looked at her a long, long time, and the composure that she had worn like armour for 30 years came apart in her face at the last, quietly. She was only a frightened, tired old woman, who had very nearly done a great wrong out of plain fear, and been forgiven it, and been offered bread instead. Why, she said, I meant to ruin you. Why ever would you do it? Because I understand you, said Clarissa, and because Anne Marsdale meant this place to feed the poor of both parishes. You, Miss Vane, whatever else you may be, are one of the poor of this parish, and it is high time somebody fed you. Take the mill. Keep it honest. Come to the harvest home. There is bread enough for all. She took it. She wept and took it. She went to the harvest home that very evening, and she kept the mill honest to the end of her days. That was Clarissa's own costly act of peace. She made it entirely alone. She staged it for no one at all. It was the plain yielding of a clean victory to a beaten enemy, out of nothing in the world, but the understanding of what it is to have only one thing, and to stand to lose it. It matched Owen's own act, and it was wholly separate from it, and neither of them had known that the other one meant to do it. And that was how Clarissa knew, for certain, watching Cordelia Vane weep over a mill-keeper's cottage, that she and Owen were the same sort of creature after all. They always had been. They had only wanted 70 years, and one good bakehouse to find it out between them. They were married at Gilder in the autumn. It was in the parish church, set between the two parishes, with both whole villages crowded into the pews, and no room to spare in any of it. They came out of the church door into the smell of good bread. For the bakehouse yard next door was baking, as it baked every single day now, for sale and for dole together, provident and generous both at once. The two houses were joined over the oven at the very last. The Duke of Tarnshaw ate a dole loaf at his own wedding breakfast. It was a plain grey-brown dole loaf, of the very kind that a poor man is glad of. He ate the whole of it, as he had promised to do in the cold front room a full year before. And he stood up before both villages and said that it was good, which it was. He said that he had been wrong, which he had. And he said that his wife had made the failing bakehouse the pride of the whole estate, which was true, and was not the half of what she had truly made. In the spring, the mason came back to Gilder, at the Dowager Duchess of Tarnshaw's own particular asking. He recut the worn old lintel over the great oven. For 70 years it had borne the very lie that the families had carved the deepest, the tale of two houses and their equal love of the poor. Clarissa had him cut the truth into it instead, small and plain, the way that Anne Marsdale would have liked it best. 2 sets of initials, a Marsdale's and a Normford's, twined together into one. Under them a single date, not the date of the founding, but the date of the fulfillment. And under that, at the last, the only motto that the place had ever truly earned for itself. By both hands. And every loaf that came out of the Gilder bakehouse from that day forward came out marked. The fine white loaf that paid its own honest way, and the plain dole loaf that a hungry family was glad of, both alike. Each came stamped upon its risen crown with the 2 marks together, the mark of High Park and the mark of Farwood, pressed into the one loaf by the one iron. No soul who ever again ate the bread of that place, rich man or poor, sold to or given, could fail to know the truth of it, that it had taken 2 houses, that it had taken 2 proud people, that it had taken one girl 70 years dead, that between them they had made a thing so good the whole estate was proud of it, and that it had only ever been possible at all by both hands together, or else by none. Thank you for listening to the story all the way to the end. Please tell us which